Hey, what's going on? This is the Body Punch Podcast, and my name is Naz. Let's talk about UFC 258. In the past, there have been some teammates that are in similar or in the same weight class that the UFC has wanted to fight each other. This has happened maybe a handful or, a couple times at this high level in the UFC. It's a very difficult thing to achieve, to have two teammates, two friends fight each other, especially for a belt. Like I said, the UFC tried this multiple times. And this one seems a little bit different. These two seemed very close. Obviously, we're looking from the outside in. But at some points, when you saw Kamaru Usman, you would see Gilbert Burns. When Gilbert Burns fought, you saw Kamaru Usman. You saw footage of them training with one another. It's not like these guys were teammates and just said they were teammates and you didn't see anything that showed you. But these guys were legitimately training with each other. And they seemed like they were good friends. Now, with the news coming out a little bit and interviews starting to come out, these two are starting to go at it, saying that the other person knows what's going to happen in this fight. Like there's some sort of secret. Kamaru is saying that the striking ability that he has and the wrestling ability is going to nullify Gilbert Burns' jiu-jitsu. Gilbert Burns is inviting the wrestling, saying that his jiu-jitsu is going to be able to take out Kamaru Usman. They're starting to go back and forth. At the beginning of this, when this fight was first announced, before Gilbert Burns got COVID, it seemed like it was going to be a really cordial fight. Not that there is many nice fight. You're fist fighting at the end of the day. But now they're going at it a little bit. It's making it a little bit more interesting. You're asking yourself the question, do one of these guys know that they can pull a rabbit out of a hat? They have that technique that can just defeat the other person? When you have camps, major gyms, like the one these two come from or came from before Kamaru Usman left and went to train in Denver. But it seems like they specialize in a weight class because they have the training partners, because they have people in that similar weight class. You get a lot of fighters in that weight class. Seems like it happened for Kamaru Usman and Gilbert Burns. The other interesting part is Kamaru went to go train in Denver now with Trevor Whitman. Kevin Gaethje's there. And even watching the the UFC vlog thing that they do, Gaethje is like around him now, around him a lot. This high-level guy that's taken Whitman's plan and executed it, albeit Trevor Whitman and Gaethje are like almost best friends. You see them playing golf with each other. They seem like they're very close, very close. Even in the company that Whitman has started, the glove company, Gaethje is really involved in that. So it seems like Usman is getting very close with Gaethje and hopefully Whitman. Maybe he can add a little bit, but we shouldn't expect that Kamaru Usman should stray away from his game plan. This is a guy that's been fighting one way for a very long time. And he's not going to forget that. And he's not going to move away from it because he's learned a couple things from his new camp. We should expect Usman to come into this fight similar to how he was fighting before. You know, whatever's not broken, you don't need to fix it. The guy is a very dominant champion. And the style we can see is working in other weight classes. That style is working in his weight classes. And the way that he's dominating people, it just seems like it's going to be working for a very long time. But then we got Gilbert Burns, who's with Henry Hooft. And they have learned Usman's game. They have learned the ins and outs of it. They were training together. They were training partners. But not just Gilbert Burns has learned a bunch, but the interesting thing that Gilbert repeats in his interviews and his media scrums is the fact is that it's not just him that learned, but all of his training partners and everybody else at that gym has learned Usman's game. We all have heard of fighters bringing in people that can duplicate the style of the opponent that they're facing. You know, it's a big thing to bring these people in. But when you have a gym who's worked with that fighter, who's seen the way he moves, who practice with him on a daily basis, it's a lot easier to replicate that. So we should expect that these two are going to use the full breadth that MMA presents. And what I mean by that is that you shouldn't expect this fight to take place in one dimension. There's many avenues that these guys could take. You know, I'm not saying that I'm able to see the future and this is going to be a straight up striking match and blah, blah, blah. I'm just saying that we shouldn't expect these two to stay and use the stuff that they've been using before. With Kamaru Usman, we've seen him use his striking in the Colby Covington fight. We've seen him use his wrestling and his cage control most recently in the Masvidal fight. We've seen Gilbert Burns attack people, knock people out. We've seen him choke people out. But maybe in this fight, we should expect them to meld it all together. Because these two, we've seen them do it all. They're not the best at everything. I mean, they have one thing that they're really good at. We all know that Gilbert Burns' jiu-jitsu is first, world class. We know that Kamaru Usman's MMA wrestling is world class. But it's going to be an interesting fight. It's going to be a good one. And I think we should take a look at both of their last couple fights. So let's start with the champ. Usman's last fight was at UFC 251. He fought Masvidal. It was a unanimous decision, but I mean, that fight, there was a lot of things that went into that. There was a whole short notice fight. Kamaru was training for someone else. I assume Masvidal was kind of training for that fight, but then officially found out, I think it was maybe a week or two before the fight was actually supposed to happen. But Kamaru Usman still came into that fight and didn't let up on the gas. He didn't try something new. He did what he knew is going to win him that fight. Kind of reminds me of the Anderson Silva DC short notice fight. I was watching that recently again. A lot of people booed DC. By the way, side note, it's so funny to watch back on fights and see how much DC was getting booed and people hated him. And now you see him, he's one of the most beloved people in the sport. Rightly so. But anyways, he went into that Anderson Silva fight. A lot of people thought that Anderson would have a striking match with DC, but DC knew what he had to do to take out Anderson Silva, which was to use his bread and butter, the wrestling, take him down, because he doesn't want to go against a world-class striker. That fight reminded me of the Masvidal fight. Short notice fight. You have to stick to your bread and butter. You have to do what you think is right to get the W. Because at the end of the day, when we're on Wikipedia and we're on the UFC.com website, we can look into all these things. We can rewatch the fight. We can do all that kind of stuff. But is it a win or a loss next to your name? That's all that really matters at the end of the day. It's your overall record. It's the win-loss. Who did you fight? Yes, we can look into it, but that's for people like you and me. We'll look into it. But the casual fan is going to look at the win and the loss. So he did what he needed to do to get the win in that fight. The fight before that was the famous Colby Covington fight that he had. That fight was a year in the making almost. It went totally the opposite way of what we thought that fight would be, which would be a wrestling exchange. You know, it's funny. I think we should just start to expect that if two people come in with similar skill sets and are people like two jiu-jitsu fighters or two wrestlers or two strikers, they will do the exact opposite of what their main skill set is. I think we should just expect that from now on. We've seen it multiple times. You know, look at Ben Askren and his fight. He was a wrestler. He went up against some jiu-jitsu guys, Damian Maia. And that turned into a striking match. So sometimes this stuff just happens. But the striking match that happened between Covington and Usman was high-level stuff. These guys did not take a step back. They didn't look tired. I mean, this fight ended in TKO punches, and Colby Covington had a broken jaw, which is ironic for the amount of talking that he does. But then that showed us how great this guy is. No matter what you say about Colby Covington, No matter you say he's just a talker. Dana White likes to talk about this. But he's a high-level UFC fighter. He is at the top. I'm not saying he just deserves to be in the UFC. I believe and know no matter what he says, no matter what he does, he's at the top of the food chain in that welterweight division. So then before that fight, we got the Tyron Woodley fight where he defeated him with unanimous decision. It was a unanimous decision win. That fight was just crazy too, because at the time we thought Tyron Woodley was the man. He's still the man. Don't go and think that you can get an easy win against Tyron Woodley. That's not the case. But at the time we were like, who's going to beat this guy? Who's going to beat Tyron Woodley? And Kamaru Usman went in there and made it look easy. And he just did whatever he wanted to Tyron Woodley. So that's the 3 fights. That's the last 3 fights on Usman's career. Let's look at Gilbert Burns. Gilbert Burns, he fought Tyron Woodley, defeated him, got the unanimous decision win. And again, Tyron Woodley is almost the benchmark for the division now. Where if you can beat him, the former champ, that says a lot. That means that you're ready for that next level. Imagine getting through Tyron Woodley, and then you have to go fight Gilbert Burns and Kamaru Usman and all of these high-level fighters in this division. It shows you how amazing this division is becoming. So he defeated Tyron Woodley. I mean, that fight was a coming out party for Gilbert Burns for the mainstream audience. I believe that's when we saw him go against a former champion and defeat him during these COVID times. It was one of the first fights that happened in the UFC Apex. Right when I'm saying this, at the beginning, it's crazy. It's been a year of this stuff, COVID. And before I would mention that certain fighters would have an advantage when they fought without a crowd. And now it's just becoming normal. It's like if you haven't fought without a crowd now, I mean, you're lagging behind a little bit. Before I would say, oh, that's an advantage. But now it seems like everybody has this kind of experience. It's funny how that stuff works. But anyways, one of the first fights that happened in the Apex against Tyron Woodley. Before that, he fought Damian Maia, defeated him with TKO punches. Damian Maia is always going to be super difficult, no matter what his age is, no matter what you say about Damian Maia. The high-level jiu-jitsu ability that guy shows is amazing. And I think a lot of people don't really mention how difficult of a test this guy is. Sometimes when you watch a Damian Maia fight, it's like you can throw whatever you want at this guy, but he just keeps coming forward. It's crazy, but he does have some difficulty taking people down and implementing that jiu-jitsu, but I mean, it's still a difficult test. Before that, he defeated Gunnar Nelson by unanimous decision. Gunnar Nelson is another jiu-jitsu practitioner that is super tough. I mean, the guy's been fighting for a little while now, trains at SBG, and he's also a difficult task. Very difficult task. It's just with these jiu-jitsu guys, they're just so... Like, look at Brian Ortega, for example. When he fought Max Holloway, it's like that guy just kept on coming forward. I don't know what it is, but some of these jiu-jitsu practitioners, they just keep on coming forward. They just keep on, no matter how much you hit them, they keep on coming forward. So that was a big win for Gilbert Burns. I mean, this fight right here is it means a lot. Not just the teammate versus teammate angle that's going on, but it's a high level fight and it's a well-deserved fight. You know, sometimes you see fights and you're like, these two, you know, one person's way better than the other. You can kind of call it. That doesn't happen much in the UFC. Credit to them, where they're always making high level fights. But this is one of those ones that you can't miss. And it's going to be a fun fight. I think that it's going to use the full breadth of MMA, all aspects of it, and you're going to see it at a super high level. So let's talk about the rest of this UFC 258 card, because a lot of people are talking about how this is not at the UFC's pay-per-view level and blah, blah, blah. But I think that there's some gems on this card, real gems. We're seeing Maycee Barber come back versus Alexei. And Maycee Barber was on this train and it was going to the moon. And that loss from the veteran Roxanne Modafferi, it halted the train, but she still believes that she can become the UFC's youngest champion. Which is saying a lot, because you're taking that from John Jones, consensus greatest of all time for some people. And that's a big ask for such a young fighter. She's gone through the surgeries. I believe she had some ACL injury, and there was another surgery that she had. But I mean, she's got a lot of potential, but it's going to be tough to take out the champ. And this is a big test on its own. Mentally, are you ready to come back? Are you ready to face the number 15th ranked fighter and get back onto the winning streak? She was 8-0 before that Modafferi fight. And credit to Roxanne Modafferi for telling the doubters no and going through with their game plan. Some people say that, Maycee Barber only lost because of her injury, but who created the injury? Who was the one that still went with the game? Because we've seen people get knocked out, get back up, and still win fights. We've all seen videos like that. We've seen people come back from stuff like this. And for Roxanne Modafferi to still go through with the game plan and take out Maycee Barber was a big deal. And it meant a lot, especially for a veteran like Roxanne Modafferi. But now we got to see if Maycee Barber is mentally ready. Because this fight for me, I think is 90% the mental game, 10% the physical. I think she took that year off. She should be ready physically for this fight, but mentally, is she going to be ready? You know, obviously we don't know what's going on in the camp and she has lingering injuries or anything like that, but let's see. And I think a real interesting fight on this UFC 258 card that a lot of people are forgetting is Kelvin Gastelum and Ian Heinisch. Ian Heinisch always comes ready to fight. I mean, his backstory is incredible. I'm sure all you guys know it by now. But being incarcerated, coming out of that and becoming a fighter like he is, and Kelvin Gastelum, one of my favorite fighters. He's just always ready to like when he fought Adesanya. How can you say that this guy doesn't have the spirit? His boxing ability, people bring up the best boxers in the UFC. Kelvin Gastelum's got one of the most high-level boxing abilities in the UFC. I'm going to say it now. And his ability for the timing, and on top of that, he's fighting in middleweight, which a lot of people don't agree is his natural weight class, but he doesn't have to cut that much weight. He was having weight cut issues before at the start of his career, but now it seems like it's kind of dialed in. But this is a big test for Kelvin Gastelum, even Heinisch. But the thing is that Gastelum was at the top. He was fighting Adesanya, and now he's on a 3-fight skid. But with high-level fighters. Like, let's go through these 3 losses. He lost to the champion, the guy that's going to fight for the 205 belt, Adesanya, in a war. Then he lost to Darren Till, who everybody knows is like a roller coaster. Sometimes you catch him on the down. Sometimes you catch him going up. Darren Till is always dangerous. That was a fun fight, and he's big for that weight division. I mean, he's a lot bigger than Kelvin Gastelum. And then he lost to Hermanson, which was by heel hook. That was a tough fight. But Kelvin Gastelum, we saw what kind of mental fortitude this guy has from that Adesanya fight. I'm super excited for that fight. Maybe it's just because I'm such a fan of Kelvin Gastelum. Even Heinisch as well. I've seen him in some scraps. But this might be the way to get Kelvin Gastelum back on the upswing. He's a fun fighter, smart guy, speaks multiple languages, very marketable, and super tough guy, high level. And then we have a bunch of other good fights on this card. We got Jim Miller versus Bobby Green. Some people were saying Bobby Green was the COVID champ, getting all those wins during COVID times. And then we got Bilal Muhammad versus Diego Lima. That's going to be a fun fight. And I think that this card, even though some of the fights, in the prelims, we got Jillian Robertson, who I'm always going to shout out because of the Canadian connection. But this card, even though at the beginning of it is kind of light, the main event and the prelims, I think, are very interesting. We got a lot of fun fights and we ran through them. I'm excited for it. I'm really excited for this championship bout that we've been wanting for a while now. And hopefully everything goes through and we're going to get a fun fight. So I really appreciate you guys listening to this podcast. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to me talk. If you guys could like, subscribe, hit the bell notification on YouTube, that would be really appreciated. If you guys can go and listen to the podcast on the different podcast platforms, it should be on all the major ones. That'd be great. If you could give 5 stars and all that good stuff on there, that'd be amazing. And thanks again for listening. This has been the Body Punch Podcast. My name is Naz. Bye.